who have sent forward wishes for us. The first is from Father Tom Doyle, who couldn't make it this evening but was invited and sent his regrets. This is a card he wrote to Father Steve. It said, "I was delighted to receive an invitation to the celebration of the 150th anniversary of Immaculate Conception Parish. That faith community, the faith community that I was born into, baptized, received First Communion, and was confirmed, has blessed me for my entire life. I lament not being present for the celebration, but I will be praying in communion with the blessed people who make up that extraordinary faith-filled community. My prayer will begin simultaneously to yours. Peace, Father Tom Doyle, CSC." The second, like many things that we owe to our good friend Mary Selecki, I have a proclamation from the governor. And you may not have known it as you went about your business today, but today was Immaculate Conception Parish 150th Anniversary Celebration Day for Washington State. So, I will read the proclamation. It says, "The State of Washington Proclamation. Whereas Immaculate Conception Parish, founded in 1861 in Colville, was the largest parish in the Oregon Territory, and whereas the church was constructed by settlers from the Hudson's Bay Company on church flats at the northeast corner of the current cemetery in Colville, and whereas in 1893 a new wooden structure was built on 3rd Street, replaced by a brick church in 1948, and the current church facility in 1998, all three using the same bell in the tower, and whereas Immaculate Conception Parish is a vibrant parish of 350 families celebrating 150 years of service to the community, now, therefore, I, Christine O. Gregoire, Governor of the State of Washington, do hereby proclaim December 8, 2011 as Immaculate Conception Parish 150 Years Celebration Day in Washington State, and I urge all citizens to join me in this special observance. Signed, this first day of December 2011, Christine O. Gregoire." Okay, so in the bulletin and at Mass in September and October, you may remember the announcements to please submit your most important, most significant moments in parish life in your experience. And we collected those for a month and a half and tabulated them at the parish council. And we came up with a list of 10 that we're going to run through quickly tonight. We have 10 different speakers to come up and speak on 10 different topics and give us a brief history according to us, according to what we think are the most significant things in our parish. So before we do that, I'm going to give just a brief pre-history leading up to 1861 so that we kind of have a little perspective, and then we'll get moving with the rest of it from there. So I'll be reading a little bit on this one, not talking so much from the top. Most of this comes from Father Pash's book. If you don't have Father Pash's book that he wrote at the 100th anniversary 50 years ago, if you haven't seen this, you should pick it up. It's a wonderful resource. It has been for me. I've learned a great deal from it, and it's just fascinating, the history of our area as well as the parish. So I'm going to start with a little passage out of that. Again, this is from 50 years ago. On this glorious occasion, when we commemorate the centennial of our church, dedicated to the Blessed Mother under the title of her Immaculate Conception, we wish to pay tribute to those priests who, in the providence of God, planted the seeds of faith in the fertile soil of the Northwest, and particularly in the Colville area. At the same time, we revere the memory of those who have heard the Word of God, became doers of the Word, and not hearers of the Word only, who with a right and good heart held it fast. So, that was from Father Pash 50 years ago. So, our area, real quickly, pre-1800s, we have obviously Native Americans and some trappers and fur traders and that sort of thing going on. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803, Lewis and Clark 1804, 1806, who explored, had Catholics in their midst in the core of discovery, and made contact with the natives at that time. And the same thing, like John Jacob Astor, those sorts of explorers. In 1821, the Hudson's Bay Company kind of took over all of the trading companies in the area, and became kind of conglomerate of all the trading companies, and then was given the right to the entire Oregon Territory. So from Alaska on the north, California, Nevada on the south, the Pacific Ocean on the west, and to the Rocky Mountains on the east side. So this huge, vast area. And so in 1834, Dr. John McLaughlin, who you may have heard the name McLaughlin in Northwest history a lot, was charged with building Fort Vancouver. And John McLaughlin built Fort Vancouver, and not so long after, in the 1830s, desired to have priests come to the fort and to have the Catholic faith be spread from the fort outward to the Oregon Territory. So he asked, get to where I am here, he asked the Oregon, he asked Bishop Provencher of the Red River Diocese, like present-day Minnesota, North Dakota, if he could send some priests out to do mission work here. He could not, and so the call went on to Bishop Signet of Quebec. And he was able to send, or Bishop Signet of Quebec was able to send Father Blanchette and his companion priest, Father Demers. They crossed the Rockies in 1838, and as far as they knew, that was the first Mass that was ever said west of the Rocky Mountains in the Big Bend area, north of here on the Columbia River, in 1838. They came through Colville after that time in November of 1838, and then continued on to the Fort Vancouver. So they were so busy, they had the entire Oregon Territory, and they weren't able to come back, even though the settlers here, the Hudson's Bay Company, and the natives wanted priests to come back. They couldn't come back, so at about the same time, the Jesuits kind of entered the picture in the 1840s. So, and the Jesuits are who really we owe our church to and our parish in Colville to. So our first the mission at St. Paul's was built in 1845 by Father Anthony Ravalli, and then we move up to the time of 1858-59. We're almost to the point where we're getting to our church, and that's when Pinckney City, Major Pinckney Luganville established the Fort Vancouver. And so once he did that, then his Army personnel and the natives and the Hudson's Bay Company really wanted to build a church, and so that's basically what happened, is that the Army personnel were able to build our church in 1861. So our first speaker is John Goldsmith, and he's going to talk a little bit about the original church. No one, obviously, is still alive. The church was in existence from 1861 to 1893, but John has done a lot of research on the site itself, and he's going to talk a little bit about that. So here's John Goldsmith.
My presentation will probably be the shortest one. When I started worrying about the condition of the original cemetery, I went up and explored with the help of Bill Danicus Jr., located the site of the original church. And so we are going to start a cleanup project and work on that spot. Can you hear me?
Just move it a little closer to your...
Okay, is this better? So we are going to clean up that old church and identify, there are several burial sites where the headstones and stuff have been overgrown. We're going to clean those up, and I'm going to invite parish participation. But when I started looking at this, I found several Catholic cemeteries, and we actually have one that was across from the Dominican Mother House, that we have people that go to our parish today, that their relatives, it's the Perkins family, go back to the Mexican-American War that are buried in that particular cemetery. And I think that it's time for us to try and catalog some of these and try and present something to the parish that memorializes these cemeteries and the people that passed before us. So there'll be a project starting come spring, And hopefully we will put something like a bench or somewhere where the original parish stood, and we're going to redo the cross that's at the cemetery now, paint it and clean it up. And it'll be a spot then that parishioners or any others can go and sit and observe what's going on in the history that we have. So that's all I have. Is it's a working project in process, and we'll invite others to participate with us, and it'll probably take a few months to complete.
When I get up there. Look at the down arrow when I get up there.
Thank you, John. Our next speaker is Mrs. Marianne Garvey. She's going to talk about the wooden church, the church that's at the current 3rd and Maple, where our church is now. Mrs. Garvey, I found out in talking to her, her family moved to Colville in the 1930s, and I remember when I was young that when I would mow the lawn, Mrs. Garvey was in the office, in the church office, and sometimes she wrote me checks. I love Mrs. Garvey.
I guess I learned early tonight as I came here that they wanted the program short and fast and get it over with. Well, I assure you that that's what it's going to be, because I came out here and left all my notes on the table at home. At any rate, I'll go briefly over this history of the Bridge Church, and that was the one that came in after the church up on Church Flat. And the wooden church was from 1893 to 1948, and the masses were said there. They moved the church down to Colville because the city was moving down to Colville from up at the fort, and they wanted the people down where they could get to the services easier. The furniture from the old church up on Church Flat was moved to the church because they didn't have enough money in building a church to build it and do all the furnishings. So the furnishings were put in as the money acquired so they could finish the church. And the fact that we're supposed to be the city, there was more activity and finances became better. The big white altar that you see on the pictures here was in that church, and if you any of you remember, anybody remember that altar? It was lots of angels and lots of saints and lots of pictures and so forth. And I understand that when this altar was replaced by the present altars, that this altar was sent up to Kelly Hill. I may be mistaken there, but I understand going to Kelly Hill, and it's the church up there. The communion rail, as I remember, the communion rail, you had to go into communion, you had to go up and kneel at the rail. You didn't walk up and give you a thing. So the church rail was down from the altar, and you had to go up and kneel at the rail, and the priest came by and gave you your communion. So this is one of the early churches, and there really isn't much that in writing to tell you much about it, but it was a very interesting church, and of course it was a wooden church, and it had a big bell tower, and I am told by somebody that when they replaced that church, the clock tower was being taken down, and mistake of the builders, it fell down. And it was spread all over the street too. So that's one of the things that I can't prove is right, but I think I understand that is true. As far as my own relationship with the church is concerned, I came to Colville in 1923. My family moved down to Colville from up in Northport, and prior to coming down here, our family was not able to go to church because the only church was in Northport, which is 14 or 15 miles away. So we came to Colville, and my father immediately made arrangements for us to start getting to church and go through the necessities of being with the church. And so I made my first communion and also was confirmed in this church, this wooden church. So I think that one of the interesting things that probably no one realized is that this wooden church, when it was first, was kind of cold in wintertime. A lot of people were coming to church in buggies, horse and buggy, and horse and sleigh in the wintertime. And there was in the lobby of the entry of the church, there was a great big wood stove. And people would come to church and they would get warmed up by the stove before they would go into Mass. And this was something that was interesting as far as the church was concerned. So the church was in 1948. It was done away with. They tore it down and built the first church that has now been replaced. So it was an interesting period of time to be living in Colville with the church and all its activities. And since, of course, we had at least one more church too. So we're a fasting community, and that wooden church was a very important part of the community. So I hope that some of you will read about their things about it, but will be a very interesting one. And I hope that you have an opportunity to read and learn more about Catholicism in Colville. It was a moving activity, and I hope it will continue to well be. I have been involved with the church here since I came home in 1923, and in 1923, and I have called the Colville Parish my home parish, even though I have been away much of the time. I was in military service and in government service for 27 years, but I came back to Colville in 1973, retired, and I've been here ever since. And I hope I'll stay until God calls me. Amen.
Thank you, Mrs. Ellis. All right, next is Mary Ellen Long to speak about the brick church. If you saw the two big new framed pictures or sets of pictures inside the church, her daughter Pamela and Mary Ellen Long put those together, and the list on your table, it has the list of all of our pastors over the years, was put together by Mrs. Long. So here she's to talk about the scripture.
Well, I did not forget my notes, so settle in. Thanks, Scotty. And I understand that Scotty volunteered for this job. So
Right, that's right.
That's great. So Eileen Bresenhan was going to do this, but she couldn't be here tonight. And so I'm privileged to fill in for Eileen and tell some of my memories of the White Brick Church. Masses were at 8 and 10. There was no Saturday evening Mass. Parking was along 3rd Street and up and down Maple Street. Theo and Mary Sherman owned the 2 houses where the present church is now. They willed them to the church for a parking lot for the White Brick Church. There was no eating from midnight on if you were going to communion, so most people with kids went to the 8 o'clock Mass. When you first walked up the stairs at the old church, you saw large wooden doors. When you entered the foyer to the church, the stairs on the right went up to the choir loft. Some of the parents let their older kids sit up there, or if you were late for Mass, which we were often, or wanted to leave early, you might sneak up there. When we had high mass, the choir filled the whole choir loft. Mary and I called her and asked her if she could remember some of the people that were in the choir, and she remembered John Raftus and Mrs. Carey playing the organ. And Mary Getter had something to do with that too, and so did Steve Giovannini, were involved with the choir. The little room that's now used as the library held the baptismal font. Most baptisms were of infants, but when a non-Catholic spouse came to church faithfully, the priest could baptize them whenever he felt they were ready. When Nora Garvey found out that Father Feist was going to another parish, she went to him and said, "Will you give me instructions so I can become a Catholic?" Father told her she didn't need instructions, as she'd been coming to church for over 10 years, and he had baptized her right then. Florence Hirsch was there that day, and she was the witness. When Nora got home, Joe said, "Where have you been?" She said, "Oh, I went to church and got baptized." Sunday at Mass, the next Sunday, she went to communion, and no one even noticed. Everybody thought she'd been a Catholic all that time. The baptismal font is now at Kettle Falls, and my dad was baptized in that font. I was baptized there, my husband was baptized there, our youngest son was baptized there, and his daughter was also baptized in that baptismal font. So when you went into the church, on the right was the confessional. It had 3 doors, and the middle door was the one that had the priest. Before Christmas and Easter, there would be long lines for confession, sometimes 15 or 20 people on each side of the church. Pat Bresenhan, he was a real gentleman, and he would be on one side, and if there was a bunch of women on the other, he would motion them on. And when I was really naughty, I always made sure I got behind Pat. Ed became a Catholic before we got married, but he'd been going to Mass with our family for over a year. Father Farley gave him a couple weeks of instructions prior to baptizing him. Now Ed was a little worried when he had to go to confession for the first time. And we told him, "Nah, it's no big deal, don't worry about it." So he went in and he knelt down and he said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. This is my first confession. I hope you'll help me with it." Father said, "Sure, Ed." The worst part was that we hadn't told Ed to whisper. So for the next few minutes, Mom and I were sitting out there and we were going, The church pews were dark wood with high backs and sides, and my dad really liked those pews. He could put his arm up there and rest his head, and nobody knew if he was asleep or not. One Christmas at midnight Mass, which was at midnight, it never was at 4 p.m. or 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. Dad rested his head on his arm, and Mom had to shake and shake and shake to get him to wake up. People pretty much sat in the same places in church, just like they do today. Theo Sherman always sat on the right-hand side. Sometimes his hearing aid would start to whistle really loud, and Mary or somebody nearby would have to poke him to let him know he needed to adjust it. Henry and Myrtle Croy sat near the front on the left-hand side. Their kids were really well behaved, and I always thought it was because they could see everything that went on during Mass. The Stations of the Cross hung along both walls, but the aisles on the sides were so narrow that the priest had to say the stations up and down the middle aisle. The statues of Mary and Joseph were in color. It was later that they were whitewashed to blend in with the background. The altar faced the east, so the priest had his back to the congregation. After the altar was turned around, the priest could see who came in late. And attendance for the entire Mass immediately improved. The sacristy was behind the altar, and the priest used to enter from around the green curtain that hung in back of the altar. When Father Pash, who was 6'2" or 6'3", and he had real thick white hair, he would come out from behind the curtain and our kids would whisper, "Oh, there's God." We had a communion rail. It was made of cedar to match the wall around the altar. The altar itself had 3 steps leading up to it. Now, if you're wondering how I remember so much about the old church, it's because I helped my mom clean it when she was a member of the Altar Society. In fact, when I was confirmed, Bishop White asked me, "When are women allowed on the altar?" And I said, "Well, when they clean it." Some of the altar boys I remember were George Hersner, Kenny Hirsch, Charlie Garvey, Joe Demo, Lloyd Ross, Ron Dallas, Lee Trunnell, Tony Gruber, Denny Croix, Bobby Raptis, and Jerry Wilcox. I told my boys they could stop being altar boys when they were taller than the priest. Then we got Father Laverdier. I think he was about 5'6", and so they were not altar boys very long. Downstairs we used for get-togethers, and when you went down the stairs from the foyer, there was a small storage room under the stairs, and then the stage where the Christmas and the Easter parties were held. Wedding receptions were also held there. And I remember when the Hirsch girls married the Gotham twins in a double wedding ceremony, all their gifts were in duplicate. Other random memories I have are a special mass that they said for Helen and Louis Ager, and the choir sang, "Don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me." Some other names I remember of parishioners were the Chapeaux, Morans, Olds, the Matlocks, Link, Phil, Bible, and Barney. And Father George Hespedes helped teach religious ed class one summer when he was just a seminarian. And I have lots of good memories of the brick church, and it's nice that we're using it now for the hall. And today, many new memories are being made in a beautiful new church. Thank you.
All right, the next event that we chose as a parish was the changes that happened with Vatican II, and Jim Kester's going to talk about those. A lot of us, and not me, were around for these changes, whether in Colville or other places. So I asked if Jim would talk about the changes for those of us who weren't around for the changes so we could understand a little bit better, and then have a Colville perspective too, because he was here for that time. So here's Jim Kester.
Gary Allen's a hard act to follow. An event of great importance for our parish as well as the entire church was the Second Vatican Council. I'm sure that Bishop Supich could talk for months on Vatican II, but in the 2 minutes I have, I'll try to describe the local events or results of just one of the documents. In December 1963, the document Sacrosanctum Concilium, or the Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy, was released. The Council's stated desire was to impart an ever-increasing vigor to the Christian life of the faithful. It stated that pastors must realize that it was their duty to ensure that the faithful take part in the liturgy fully aware of what they were doing, were actively engaged in the rites, and were enriched by its effects. In the renewal of the liturgy texts and rites, the Christian people should be enabled to understand them with ease and to take part in them fully and actively. To promote active participation, the people should be encouraged to take part by means of acclamation, responses, psalmody, antiphons, and songs. Those functions prior to Vatican II were the responsibility of the altar servers and the choir. It further stated, since the use of the mother tongue frequently may be of great advantage to the people, the limits of its employment may be extended. So, with that, a myriad of changes began to take place. to the joy of some and the consternation of others. We began to celebrate the Mass in a language we could understand, even if the first translation from Latin wasn't quite what it should have been. As a former altar boy, I often wondered what happened to the spirit in Et cum spiritu tuo, and to mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. I guess we've got it back. We didn't have to try to keep up with the priest by reading along on the English side of the Missal. When Father Pash was here, our sanctuary was extensively remodeled, including a new altar which faced the congregation, and the communion rail was removed. We could receive the body of Christ in our hand and drink from the cup of his precious blood. The procession of the priest and ministers started and ended the Mass. Lectors proclaimed the readings other than the Gospels during the liturgy of the Word. The gifts were brought to the altar by lay people. Eucharistic ministers aided the priest in distributing the Blessed Sacrament. We saw altar girls as well as altar boys. The rites of other sacraments were changed. And I know that for those of you out there less than about 45 years of age who grew up after these changes have been set in motion, these things are routine. But for us old fogies, these are very exciting times. These are just a few of the changes started by Vatican II. Other documents brought about many other opportunities to help us increase our awareness of the Spirit of God in this wonderful parish. Thank you.
All right, next we'll hear about the Dominican sisters in the call area from my dad, Phil Stahl. He has a very special place for the sisters, as we all do, but here he is, Phil Stahl.
Yes, I'm very honored and privileged and blessed to be able to speak about something I'm very passionate about, and that's the influence that sisters have had in our community, in our parish, and in the Pacific Northwest particularly. The women religions. St. Dominic established the order of preachers in the 12th century. Sister Bonaventura Grow and 11 Dominican sisters came to the Pacific Northwest from Speyer, Germany in 1925 at the bequest of Bishop John P. Carroll. They were asked to take charge of the domestic affairs of Mount St. Charles College in Helena, Montana, which of course is now Carroll College. The Dominican ideal led to the founding of the province of Montana and Northeast Washington and its expansion in the 1930s. Sister Bonaventura came to Chihuahua in 1929 and began construction of St. Joseph Hospital, which I just learned that putting this together. The first provincial home was established outside of Chihuahua in 1931. By 1935, Our Lady of the Valley Provincial Home was established in Kettle Falls, and there were 32 Dominican sisters at this time. Between 1944 and 1963, 69 American-born women entered the community. The community had grown to more than 120, and they were running hospitals and schools in 12 locations in the Pacific Northwest. The Dominican Sisters Provincial Home remained in Kettle Falls until 1969, when it was relocated to Spokane. The primary ministry developed while they were in Kettle Falls was to serve the poor and the disadvantaged. Although the primary careers for the Dominicans in Germany had been teaching, the principal benefit of the Dominicans in our area was the establishment of the Dominican Network. Mount Carmel Hospital in Colville, St. Joseph Hospital in Chihuahua, the nursing home, and Dominicare in Chihuahua are all part of the larger Dominican Network. Other ministries of the Dominican Network are Holy Family Hospital and Holy Family Adult Day Health and various social ministries in the area. The Dominican sister served as a hospital administrator for Mount Carmel Hospital from 1940 until 1974, when a lay administrator was appointed for the first time. In 2002, Sisters Mary Esther, Annie, and Benigna moved to Spokane as the last Dominican sisters to live and work in Mount Carmel Hospital in Colville. In my personal life, the influence of women religious and Dominican sisters in particular has been very large. I've said many times that although we pray for vocations, I think we need to pray more directly for vocations for women religious. Just think of the impact they've had in history, the history of religious communities. You see the truly positive influence they've had on our social conscience and the Catholic formation of our children. I am thankful and appreciative of having the opportunity to know and to love and to be ministered by many sisters. Some of the Dominican sisters I have known here in Colville are Sister Mary Esther, Sister Amelia, Sister Annie, Benigna, Cosma, Veronica, Judith, Sharon, and here with us this evening, Sister Bernadette and Sister Mary. In my mind, it isn't so much what they did or what they are doing in our midst, it is just their holy presence. Father Connell said it very well when the Dominican sisters left Colville. The sisters brought warmth that is very important in terms of healing. We are losing models of Christian life, of dedication, of sacrifice. We as a community and the church should continue to thank God for the sisters we have had here and pray for the continued influence of them in our lives and the lives of future generations.
All right, next we have Vicornier, who's going to talk about a grouping that we put together from a lot of different submissions that people had in terms of, I remember this sermon or the music on this one, during this one part of Mass at one point, or these sort of things. Vicornier's been a part of the choir for as long as I can remember, and part of the liturgies always, so she's very well qualified to talk about this, so thank you. Come on, Mrs. Cornier.
When Scotty first asked me to talk about music and liturgy, I wasn't sure where to begin. So I thought about when we first came to the parish 45 years ago, just as Vatican II reforms were starting. There were many Sunday Masses without music, although sometimes Mrs. Getter would play the organ. And there were hymns sung by a small choir in the choir loft of the old church. Can you imagine having no music for Sunday and Holy Day liturgies, for funerals, reconciliation, and other special services? Someone once told me that singing was twice praying. It lifts our hearts, our prayers to heaven in song. One of the big changes of Vatican II was that music should be sung by the congregation, not just the choir. We're not there to perform, but to lead our parish family in prayerful song. Sometimes solemn, sometimes it's joyful. When the right hymns are chosen for liturgy, it adds the prayerfulness of the readings. And I suspect that sometimes you'll find yourself humming or singing one of the hymns even after you leave church, prayerful singing. So where are we in our parish today? Our choir family started when Father Donnelly was here in the mid-70s. I think Paul was complaining that there was no music, and Father challenged him to provide some. So Paul taught himself to play guitar while watching his kids in the bathtub. And he, along with the McDonoughs, started singing up front. And there were a few others that I don't remember. I started and joined them in 1979. Then Ron Webster told us about this wonderful guitar player that just moved here from Brewster. Enter Mimi. She was great. C and D chords and many wonderful air chords. The music was mostly simple songs from glory and praise. We've come a long way since then. Many different people have come, sung, and played with us, and through the years, and then they moved away or chose other ministries. But then we'd be joined by others. We have always been blessed with more gifted and dedicated singers, musicians, guitars, flute, and on an occasion, a pianist, if we're lucky. We've become a close-knit family in the midst of our parish family, and open to new members whenever. We've gone from weekly choir practices in our homes, with some wine and cheese, to weekly choir practice in the church for many years, to a half hour before Mass for some of us, and learning new music on Sundays after Mass. Over the years, we've sung at nursing homes, we've serenaded, older people or people who needed a lift. We've gone Christmas caroling with the ambulance crew, and just whenever we've been called on, we've actually gone to Northport a few times, some funerals there. We've just kind of gone all over where they've needed us. So times have changed. Our lives seem more busy than ever, but we've always been and still are a work in progress, and we sing to lead our parish family in giving glory to God with music. It's a wonderful ministry. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next event that was chosen was the events around Father Terry Franklin's passing. Jocelyn Beaumont will speak about this. Like many of us, she was very close to Father Terry, and she and her husband Dave continued their tribute to Father Terry and Kevin by doing the highway cleanup until just this fall. So here's Jocelyn Beaumont.
Dave and I moved to the Northwest looking for a place to retire. We found Colville. This was in the summer of 1991. We attended Mass and we were pleasantly surprised to find Father Terry Grant. Immediately we liked him and we said, this is a nice parish, this is a nice town, let's think about looking for a place. We moved here in June of 1992. Sometime in the fall of that year, it was announced on a Sunday that Father Terry Grant was leaving. Well, we got a little shook up about that one. We had just gotten used to him and his homilies and his character, and he was just a neat guy, and we were sorry to see him go. But who came in? Father Terry Franklin. He was his replacement. We found out then that they were good buddies, and they had lots of stories. They went hunting together, fishing, canoeing, getting each other lost, whatever. We thought this might not be too bad. So Father Terry Franklin came to visit, came to us in November of 1993, just in time for the church directory. In fact, that was the first time that I met him. I was checking folks in, and there he was in his black shirt uniform, and he said, this will be the first and last time you see me in this. And we said, He wasn't disrespectful, he just preferred casual clothes. We all know that. Remember some of his shirts. In the first photo here, he is meeting with some of his parish council leaders. And in January, he celebrated his 40th birthday. And the two little people in the picture are Jessica Kirpus and little Tommy Huff. Along with Elaine, of course. Father Terry was very charismatic and very caring. His homilies were very informative, interactive, and very interesting. Who could forget the popcorn homily with the old maid's explanation? Or the black jelly beans? And then, of course, we all learned a new term, C&E Catholics, demonstrated by the cheap Christmas decorations. And how about the time, in accordance with the reading of that day, where he had asked everyone to get up and move one pew forward. It was moving you out of your comfort zone. Well, I remember the sisters would not move. They sat in the seventh pew on the right-hand side, and they would not move. Sister Cosma said, I bought that pew. Anyway, that was Father Terry's 40th birthday. We celebrated it with the sister, well, we celebrated it in the bottom of the church. Somewhere along the line, Kevin Walker, the young man with the fish, came to Colville. He was getting into trouble down in LA, and Mom and Dad, because Father Terry was godparent to some of his siblings, Mom and Dad said, could you please take him because we need him to shape up and do some of your godparent duties. So Kevin came to live with Father Terry. Kevin got hooked on fishing the first time out, and you can see why, because that was the first big fish, and that was the only fish that he caught as far as I know. He also celebrated his 17th birthday with us, which is the next slide. There he is. He celebrated his 17th birthday with us and with the sisters. Those are sister, in the left-hand picture with Kevin is Sister Cosma, Sister Mary Esther, Kevin, Sister Annie, and Sister Veronica. And then on the opposite side are the same sisters. Okay. Father Terry celebrated Easter with us, and after his Easter celebration, he and Kevin both went on their ways for their vacations. The candle that is by Father Terry was made by Father Terry. It was a 4-inch diameter candle, which I think the normal candle now is 3 inches, but his was a 4-inch and it weighed a ton. He came to us one day and had these little nails, and he said, "Dave, could you blacken these for me, because I want to put them into the candle." So Dave did that. After the last Easter, Father Terry went to Hawaii. Kevin went to LA to be with his family. And who could have known that in the short period of 5 months, this beautiful Christian man could affect our lives as he did? Yes, sir.
All right, next on our list, our adult faith formation will be spoken about by Paul Sprangers, another figure in our church. See him every day with the, or every Sunday with the guitar up front, and member of the church for many years. I grew up with his kids.
I'm coming.
I didn't have anything else to say, so I had to walk in and quiet there.
All right, Scotty said I have 2 minutes, but I have 5 former priests here that I have to sit through homilies for hours. And a new bishop, so I'm best going to take my time. The bishop said he hurried up, but look, Father Darren, he's all red. Oh, well, you know, you're next, yeah, exactly. I'm going to talk about adult education, adult faith formation. We moved here in '73, Sharon and I, and we're from Wisconsin. We got into service, didn't know anybody in town, moved up here, and for about the first 7 years, our church was, as Sharon said, dead. She always said she had nobody to pray with in our church because Catholics didn't pray. So we kind of got friends with a lot of non-Catholics, and we were in share groups, and we were in Bible studies and that kind of stuff. And Sharon always wanted us to start parish renewal. In 1982, Father Bob O'Neill was here, and he told her that if he could find somebody to head it up, he would do it. And Father Shufflemere had done one in Spokane. And so she asked me, and I said, no, that's not for me. And besides, you know, we go to church on Sunday, and that's pretty much all Catholics ever had to do. So I went on a Crescio, which was a non-Catholic Crescio, and I came back, and I was really pretty excited about God. And so Sharon went to daily Mass all the time, but I pretty much just went on Sundays, because I stayed home and take care of the kids. And so I said, I got up on Monday morning and I said, I'm going to go to church this morning. And Sharon goes, what? And I said, you can't, you watch the kids, and I'm going to go to church this morning. So she was pretty flabbergasted. So I went in on Monday, and as all the priests can tell you, I'm always late. And I pretty much go to daily Mass, so I got there during the homily. And Father O'Neill was at the podium in our old church reading the gospel, and there was not one person in that church. Not one. So that was another turning point in my life. I decided I would head up the parish renewal. It was a lay witness weekend in 1982, and I would guess that maybe only 10% of the people in the room were here at that time. And it was it was taken from the Baptists, so what you had to do is meet in share groups and talk about your faith. And at the end, you had to actually do a spontaneous prayer, like not an Our Father or a Hail Mary, but kind of go around the group and do it. And the leadership group were the Stolps and the Corniers, Jake and Donna Doyle, Sharon and I. There was probably somebody else, but we had to kind of, the first time to say a prayer, we had to try this out. It was awkward, let me tell you. Just trying to say a prayer. But the group came up from Jennings, Louisiana. It was a lay witness thing, and it just changed our parish from nobody talking about anything to everybody talking about everything. And as a sidebar, these girls from Louisiana, good-looking Southern girls, I used to comb my hair straight back, and so it would be straight. And I took them on a trip on the morning over the thing, and I didn't have time to straighten my hair, and it was all curly. And they said, "What'd you do to your hair, curl?" I said, "Well, it's this way naturally because I didn't have time." They said, "It's really nice. You ought to leave it that way." Sharon says that she's been telling me that for years. So anyway, from there, our parish did share groups, and during this renewal, we had we met in homes, and there was probably about 8 to 10 people in share groups, and we had 20-some share groups going every night of the week, different nights, for 6 months. And the whole parish got to share, and then we had meetings like this, and it was really spectacular. After that, the parish got going. We started doing koinonia weekends. We did them here. We did probably 10 to 12 of them. And it was, again, it was a lay witness weekend. And most of you that are in here that I can see, let's just say a ton of you have been on those weekends. I was involved in Spokane, and it was kind of a scary thing. We decided to do one in our parish where people would go home at night and could not come back. And so we were kind of worried we'd start this and nobody would show up the next morning. But actually it worked out very well, and we did a couple in Chewelah. We went to Salt Lake City for Father Tom Kraft, invited us down for the 3 universities. And from our parish, a group of 20 would take off on October as President's Day, because most of them were teachers. And we'd get out of school, they get out of school at 3 o'clock. We'd drive to Utah, so the next morning we could set up and do this renewal for the weekend. And then we'd leave on Sunday afternoon and drive back so they could get back on Monday so they'd go to school. And our parish is actually responsible for the St. Louis Diocese, Salt Lake City Diocese. They're up to 25 koinonias now. And they're still doing them. They made it an official thing. So our faith community, I think our parish has just gone leaps and bounds from 82 to now. You know, there's a share, whatever they are now. There's what, 60-some people still going to the Bible studies, which is pretty much remarkable. There's a prayer chain. There's just a lot of faith stuff in our community. So if you had been here in '73 and you would be here now, you would have to say, if they could see me now. Thank you.
All right, and now Father Darren on his way up to talk about the current church that we're in.
Pretty much all of you lived through the history of the building of the church that we dedicated in 1998, so I'm not going to go into any of that. You know all that detail as much as I do. Mary Ann Garvey was talking about some of the elements of the old church, and Mary Ellen Long mentioned some. I guess I'm really confident that there are elements of our church that will be respected and recorded in history. We have our beautiful Loire glass windows from France, both from the old church and now the new ones. We have our cast bronze crucifix from Vincent de Felice, a one-of-a-kind piece. The icons that were written in Pennsylvania, one of a kind. The icons that are in the vestibule that we got from Santorini in Greece. We have the olive wood Stations of the Cross, hand-carved Stations of the Cross from the old church. And of course the green marble that reminds all of us of Ireland, which is very important. So I'm confident these things will be recorded well in history. I guess my hope is that something else is recorded, and it's related to what Bishop Skillstad said to me after we had the big dedication in March of 1998. He simply said to me, after we finished all the celebrations and stuff, and just had a moment to collect ourselves, he said, Darren, this community is very healthy and very strong. The effort that we did in pulling off a task that really many people told us we couldn't do, fundraisers, diocesan officials, and others, and Jack Heaney, I think at one point, really is a testament to the strength and the health of the Catholic community here in Colville. And we were strong before the building of the new church, and this community was even healthier and stronger after the building of the new church. You were also poorer. And so that's my hope, that when the history of this particular era is written, that the health and the strength of the Catholic community in Colville will be remembered.
Thanks, Father. Okay, our 10th and final event, significant event in parish history. Bill Danicus Jr. will talk about the events of Wyatt Goldsmith's memorial. And we all know Bill Jr. and Bill Sr., they've both comforted us all at one time or another. Bill's not going to give a eulogy. He's going to put in perspective for our parish and for our community this event that happened this last summer. So here's Bill Danicus Jr.
Good evening. It's not often in the commemoration of an establishment that a funeral makes the list of the most notable. I was asked to speak on one, but I would like to take a moment and bow our heads and recognize all of those who have gone before us, especially whose lives were celebrated within the Catholic faith. Thank you. Our church has given faith, hope, and love to many in a time of significant need. A more adequate reflection of the church's good works requires that we look at three. On July 22nd, 1995, we lost an 8-year-old boy in this community, and the community was shattered. His name was Cameron D. Warner. He was struck by an automobile while riding his bicycle. Father Bob McNeese opened his arms and the use of this facility to our brothers and sisters in the Catholic faith. Mind you, Catholic with a small c. And on August 18th, Cameron's life was celebrated by his mother, father, grandparents, sister, extended family, a community of children, parents, educators, friends. Our sanctuary was full. That same year, only months later, this community lost another icon, a successful businesswoman, and an incredibly charitable soul. Catherine E. Bell, better known to our community as Cookie, again in service to a need that reached beyond our faith community. The doors of the church were opened. The sanctuary was again literally overflowing, and our sanctuary provided faith, hope, and love. Now, we need only look back but a few months to remember when news of a Special Forces medic lost his life in Afghanistan while in service to our country and saving lives. This young man of 28 years, Wyatt Goldsmith, was one of ours. a local boy who played soccer on our green fields, a Colville High School graduate, a 49 Degrees North ski patrolman, and a Catholic, this time with a big C, a Roman Catholic. We were silenced, and our pain was shared well beyond this community. I remember the day we received him and the thousands of people that lined the roads, the streets, and the highway. They stood quietly, many with hand over heart. Mothers with one child in their arm, and the other arm free to clear the tears from their eye. We were coming home with a hero. Father Steve Werner began preparing himself and our Catholic family to embrace the needs of hundreds, our Catholic brothers and sisters, capital C, small c, and some with no C at all. Our presence, liturgy, and sanctuary, together offering a place of comfort, remembrance, and refuge for our son, Wyatt Goldsmith. Coordination efforts began. Our mission to unite the Department of Defense, fellow soldiers, law enforcement, local, state, federal, county, fraternal organizations, the Knights of Columbus, veterans groups, kids clubs, schools, dignitaries, our bishop, Army defense officials, veterans groups, kids clubs, the governor's office, ski patrol, Wyatt's friends, and community members. United in purpose. First, to give thanks to God for the gifts that Wyatt had given us and the gift that God had given us in Wyatt. Second, to honor a fallen hero. And third, to offer faith, hope, and love to John and Lori and Nicole and all of Wyatt's family. The day came, and again, the streets were lined. On July 26, 2011, the church opened its arms, doors, sanctuary, fellowship hall, courtyard, and every nook and cranny in between to all who need to attend. And we celebrated Mass. To all of you, well done. Well done. And thank you. Thank you for your time this evening and your walk down this ever so important memory road. Good evening, and God bless.
All right, thank you, Bill. So our evening is going to close. Again, thank you to each of the parishioners who spoke and to Father Darren for speaking about our 10 events this evening. You all did a great job. It was a great trip down memory lane there. A few things coming up. They're in your program. This is the beginning of our celebration year. So there's a couple of things that I'd like you to be aware of. The first is posted over here. There's a timeline you can see. Tracy was going to come up and talk about it. We're a little short on time. I think we're going to fly through. But there will be an opportunity for you to have a look at this timeline and place your own events on this. and you may write on the timeline. If we run out of space, we'll extend it. If you want to put your own pictures on the timeline of parish events, you can do that throughout the year. It will be in the church hall, and we'll make a great picture of our faith together and our community together throughout the years, for as far back as you can or want to go, and have information you'd like to put on the timeline. That will be a thing we can do all year long. I'm sorry. Oh, and Tracy Delia is in charge. She's doing a great job with this, but to please write on the timeline. When you go to look at the timeline and write things, write memories of your own personal stories, whatever it is that you feel you'd like to have included on the timeline that's important in the parish.
Baptisms, funerals.
Okay, yeah, so baptism, funerals, that sort of thing, that all will go on to our timeline. As you've seen here tonight, some of the stories are amazing of the parishioners, and every single person in the room has stories. So one project that will kick off probably after the first of the year is an oral history project, where anyone who has a desire will be able to record their stories of the parish and their experience here and that sort of thing as well for an archive for our parish. So that in 50 years from now, when they celebrate the 200th, we'll have actual audio that can be played at that time. So that's another project. John Goldsmith talked about the monument plan for the cemetery and the original church site. There will be a parish mission, March 19th through the 21st. The topic will be the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola, who founded the Jesuits, who were so important to the founding of our parish. So look forward to that, March 19th through the 21st. And then just another small thing, keep your eyes out in the bulletin. There's so many facts and stories and wonderful things about our parish that a small thing I'd like to do this year is at least put one thing that maybe you haven't heard about our parish in the bulletin each week. And so just keep an eye out, and if you have anything you'd like to submit that you think everyone might like to see in the bulletin, that would be great too. There won't be one this Sunday. I think you've got it covered tonight. So we'll start next week. So I know that the bishop would like to talk for a moment and say a final prayer, but I'd like to thank everyone for coming again. Lori Roberts and the entire crew and everyone who's helped me to set this up. It's been unbelievable. My wife and family, oh my gosh, it's been a lot. So, thank you. And have a look at the thank yous on the back of the program as well. This has been an amazing experience for me to get started in this process and to hear these stories. This community is unbelievable, and the exciting thing is to look back at the past and then realize that the future is what's coming, and it's going to be as great or better. So thank you for coming tonight, and then Bishop Supich, please.
Thank you. I just want to congratulate all of you again on coming together with such a wonderful faith, but also commitment to each other. It's so very important. One thread, it seems to me, that pulls the whole evening together in the celebration is the way that you have such a dedication to family. That's so very important. Families are struggling in many ways today, and you seem to be able to marshal the resources as a community to support the individual families within this community, and as a result, that redounds to a stronger community because of those families having that kind of support. That's the way that the faith is going to be passed on to the next generation. So I would encourage you, anything that you can do to strengthen your families within this community will be a wonderful investment for the future, for the next 50, 100, and 150 years. I'm convinced of that. The more I see the way that communities grow or maybe fall apart, it's the bedrock of a community when those families are so strong. So I'm going to pray for that in the closing prayer and then end with the final blessing. Father, you call us to be disciples of Jesus, and He invites us into your family, a divine family. Move our hearts always with the same generosity that the Trinity has for one another, one in which life is poured out and received. Life is enhanced through sacrifice and commitment. Bless in a special way all the families of this parish those that are struggling for the effort to feed their children and raise them in an environment sometimes that is counter to their values. We also ask your blessing on those who are newlywed and beginning families, those who are expecting children, bringing them into this world. For families as well who are struggling to find employment in this difficult economy, those whose marriages are strained at this time. Keep them ever close to you and allow this community with your grace to be supportive of all. And we ask all of this in your blessing in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Congratulations. Thanks again.
Okay, I think that's about it. Thank you very much. If you didn't sign up to help clean up and you want to, you're very welcome. If you wouldn't mind stacking a chair, that would be great too. Thank you very much. Drive safely.